everyone. I'm Dan Albers, and welcome to Dingo and the Coach. As always, I am Dingo, and that is a coach, Steve Ellis. And Steve, super pumped up to have our next guest. We've been trying to get her on for a little bit. Is Kathrine Nero, well known around the Cincinnati area on television, and now you're seeing her on Bally Sports. And I can't wait to hear her stories and how she got to Cincinnati. And kind of we were talking off air here about the Cincinnati sports scene and all that. So it's going to be great to catch up with her.
Well, not just a celebrity, Danny. So we're both kind of in awe a little bit, but just a,
Absolutely.
a natural. Because I was watching some videos of her, and it's just a natural, in
Yeah.
front of the camera. So she's gonna really make us look good here. I can tell.
Well, I mean, I could tell Steve. I could tell already by just looking at the camera, and how she's got everything set up.
Oh yeah,
The light looks good.
light looks good on
Looks
my
good.
forehead.
You got the
Yeah,
makeup on. We're just we're not we don't have it all going on.
Gotta
But
do it.
yeah.
as we said, joining us, Kathryn Nero. Kathryn, thanks for joining us.
Oh, I'm so glad. That was very nice, you guys. Yeah. Now listen, you guys have all the sports stuff. I've got a combination of Elvis stuff back here and
Yes.
all kinds of you name it. It's all there. But yeah, little bits and pieces of what makes me me. I feel like that makes
Yes,
the best backgrounds, right?
I love
totally,
it.
totally agree. That's all. What's funny is because I was going to start off this. The first question I was going to ask you was, the typical question that everybody asks in Cincinnati is, "What high school are you from?" So I
Yeah.
was going to throw that out to you because I'm sure when you first came to Cincinnati, tons of people ask you that question.
Yeah. And my answer was White Station. And they're like, where's that? I'm like, it's really far south. Like just keep going. Like way far south to Memphis and you'll find it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that eternal question. And then when you say, "Oh, I'm not from here," there the answer is like, "Oh, okay. Isn't
Okay.
that
See ya.
sweet?" But I'll say this though, I can now play that game. So I've been married to my husband almost 24 years now. And so he went to Dixie Heights. My daughter is about to graduate from Dixie Heights. Another one went to Holy Cross. So like I got Northern Kentucky. I got
Yeah.
you. So like
There you
I can
go.
play that 7 degrees of separation and all that good stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, it is a very close knit area and I love it.
What's funny too about it is I work over in Kentucky, and I'm an Ohio guy. Most of the guys there are from Kentucky, and I walked in, and they do the same thing. I was
Mhm.
shocked that I thought it was just a Cincinnati thing, and it's not a Cincinnati thing.
Oh, no, it is a neighborhood thing, and that's the thing, like, even I remember, one of the first dates I went on with my husband, he's from Northern Kentucky, so, like, we were driving down Dixie Highway, and I'm like, "Okay, so where are we right now?" He's like, "Okay, well, right here is Park Hills, and, like, there's Covcath." I'm like, "Okay, I gotcha." And then I'm like, "So Park Hills?" He's like, "Well, no, now we're in Fort Wright." I'm like, "Okay, Fort Wright." He's like, "Well, now we're in Fort Mitchell. Now oh, wait, now we're in Edgewood." Like, you go 2 minutes, and it's a new
Yeah,
city, and
Yeah.
each of those cities has, like, their high school, their grade school, whatever it is, and they're partial to it. And so,
yeah,
wherever you are, whichever side of the river you're on, you find it.
yeah, absolutely.
So I have a question for you. So going back, what was the name of your high school?
My high school is White Station High
White
School.
Station. Okay.
Yes.
So what? And we usually ask this, but were you involved in any sports? I mean, obviously, question would were you involved in the newspaper or any type of journalism there?
Oh my gosh, you asked about the newspaper. I think I actually have mine still sitting here. I found it the
Yes.
other day.
Yes.
I must have put it away. I actually was in the newspaper, of course, because I mean,
Okay.
listen, I was the worst athlete that has ever lived. And so my dad had 2 girls and he did the best with what he had, right? So
Okay.
my sister played golf and soccer. I was like, well, I like watching it. And so I loved watching sports. I watched, and Memphis is a really interesting area because it's in the middle of SEC country without an SEC team, right?
Right.
So we felt like every SEC team was kind of a home team. So we
Sure.
watched, I mean, and I've worked in Memphis before I came here in sports, and we would cover Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Alabama in some cases, Tennessee, Memphis as
Wow.
Wow.
home teams. So, I mean, we would travel to these. So I got to go to so many awesome SEC football stadiums and basketball arenas to see these, these athletes and these teams. And it was like trial by fire. But I grew up watching that stuff and loving everything from the Olympics
Yeah.
to college football to basketball, you name it. And then coming here really was trying to find a place where there were big league teams. And, Cincinnati
Yeah.
was a perfect fit for that.
Yep.
That's incredible. And so, I mean, that's why I was just kind of wondering, how you got started, and what path took you there.
So strangely enough, and I always tell when I talk to middle schools, high schools, and all of that, I always tell people this story because they don't believe it. I was so shy that my mother was like this far from going, "Hey, I don't know about this being on TV thing. I'm not sure you're gonna be able to ask somebody for an interview. I don't think you're gonna have the cojones to do this. She called it the gall or the gumption.
Yeah.
But so I was just really shy. And then my junior year, and this tells you how much of a geek I was, and I own it and I love it. I was on the academic team, and they would
Okay.
only let me answer questions about current events, sports, and mythology. They're like, if you answer a math question, you're out of here.
You're
Like,
right.
absolutely not. So I was hanging out with all these smart kids, right? And I'm like, whoa, I'm one of those guys. I held my own with these smart
Yeah.
kids, and I don't know, it gave me some confidence. And that's when it all changed. This is one of the main reasons that whether it's athletics or chess club, whatever it is, extracurricular activities, I think make a huge difference in a kid's
Yeah.
life. And you guys are around high school kids all the time, you know exactly what it can do. And that's what it did for me. So I was on the newspaper staff, and one of the articles I wrote was about Sam White back in the day and not
Really?
wanting
Oh,
in the locker room. Like, that's what I just found. And I'm so mad that I don't know what I
Really?
did with it. It was literally sitting on my desk for weeks. And so this is what I wanted to do from day one. So when I went to the University of Memphis, and when I got there, I was in it for my scholarship interview, and the guy I was interviewing with was like, well, what do you want to do? And I told him, I'm like, I want to be on TV. I want to be a sports reporter. And he was like, you should work in the sports information office. I'm like, that sounds great. And he's like, here's the guy's name. Go over and do a job interview right now. And I'm like, okay. I didn't know enough not to know that that's not the way it goes. So I
okay.
went over and I applied for or interviewed for a job that paid me $4.25 an hour,
Nice.
for 10
Wow.
hours a week. I think I worked about 20, but it gave me a great opportunity to work at the time with Penny Hardaway was the player of the year. He was at Memphis when
Wow.
I was there. And so now he's the coach. Like, it's crazy to think about
Yeah.
how far it's come. But so I got to work on Olympic sports like, track and field and that sort of thing, doing media guides. I got to work basketball games. Back in the day, this is going to date me. We actually had to run copies of all the stats and hand them out to all the media members. Now it's
That's
an email that you
crazy.
open up, but
Uh-huh.
yeah. So that's what I did, and I loved it. And so I met TV people that way, the media, and so I got internships and then moved into reporting from there. And honestly, I was extremely lucky because right as I graduated, the Fox station in Memphis switched from Fox to ABC. And so back then, Fox stations did not have newsrooms. So they had literally no one in their newsroom. They had to hire 100 people. And obviously they ran out of money because they were like, why don't you come in and I was really good at spelling, so they let me do the graphics. So that's how I started.
Really?
I worked graphics, and then they realized they needed help in sports. And this is another thing I tell students when I talk to them: don't ever tell your boss, I'll do it for free, because they'll say, sounds great. And that is exactly what they did. So
Really?
I was a sports producer. I did it for whatever my graphics operator pay was, but I worked weekends and then just kept moving up, reported and then anchored, and then ended up coming here. And I thought I was going to be here for 2 years and go somewhere else, but I ended up loving it. And here I sit so many years later.
I mean, so I mean,
Wow.
the quick progression though is just crazy because I got into the broadcasting thing really, really. I always wanted to do it too. Got into it late, and I was just old and just too much older, and I had a kid, and it was just
Mhm.
I just the money, like you said, was at the
It's
time I
not
couldn't
there.
do it,
Yeah.
and that is just crazy how fast that you progress because that sounded like it was a pretty good, fast
It
progression.
was fast, and again, it was a lot of the reason was because they had to hire from the ground up. Like, I don't think that would have happened in any other situation. The interesting thing is now it's happening again, and the reason is, and I really try not to dissuade people from wanting to go into television news, including my daughter who thought about it for a moment, and I was like, "Hold on now. The starting salary is barely more than it was when I started in Cincinnati in 1998. Like, it
Oh
has
my
Really?
goodness.
it has not moved, and it's because of a lot of things, but, how are we all watching news now? Like, we're not
Yeah.
sitting down
Right.
with, the local news,
Right.
6 o'clock, we gotta see what's going on. We have so many other ways of finding out, what's happening. But
Yeah.
that said, the cool thing about it is I think sports is the thing that really is going to make a difference. And what I mean is, for so long, like, you can get news anywhere, right? I mean, local news, you need a local news outlets for that, and thank goodness they're still doing that and doing it well. But local sports, there's literally nowhere else to go for that. I mean, we might be able to get the UC and the Xavier scores and KU scores elsewhere, but we're not getting high school sports. We're not getting great stories.
Right.
And that's where local journalism really can make a huge difference. I mean, you look at the Inquirer, and I worked there for 3 years after I left TV. They do such a great job there. And prep sports is one of the things they do so well. They cover so many things with such a small staff. And I think that that's one of the things that we should be happy is still around. And I think it's one of the things that's going to keep local journalism going.
Totally agree. Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean, like even around here in Anderson, they had a couple of like community press type of papers. And growing up as a kid, I mean, that was such a cool thing to look in there and read about local things and obviously about the sports. And that's even gone. I mean,
Yeah, and my husband played 3 sports, and for this was not 10 years ago. His mother put together the scrapbook of all the clippings from the community
Yep.
press, and I'm like, I cannot believe there was an article this long about a Dixie Heights versus
Yeah.
Cub Cap football game or whatever it was, and it's amazing that and with the box score, with all of this, right? And so
Yeah.
all of it. And so yeah, it's sad that that part doesn't exist. It also sad that like the physical paper part of it, if you want
I
those
love
scores, you're
that.
gonna find them
Agreed.
online because they're not
Yep.
gonna be in the paper for 2 more days. But yeah, things have changed. But as I always say, good stories are good stories, and that's what we got to find and tell.
Yep.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. I'm going to switch gears
Yeah.
because you had mentioned what's behind you and living in Memphis. So, I mean, Danny knows how much I love Elvis, and my whole family loves Elvis. So
Me too.
let's
my
talk a
mug.
little.
Yeah.
Yes, look at that. Let's talk a little Elvis. And
Yeah.
I mean, have you been to Graceland or did I
Not
hear
only have I been to
something?
Graceland, I worked at Graceland. I
That's what I
worked
heard.
there. Yep, I worked
Wow.
there several summers, and I tell people, yeah, I've got my Elvis bobbleheads, my Elvis Pez dispensers. They're all over the place.
What?
There's another bobblehead over here.
Oh my gosh.
That job, I think, taught me more about ad-libbing and being able to, let's say, entertain people than anything I've ever done before or since. I had to, in the middle of Memphis, 110-degree summer weather,
Yeah.
entertain people, many of whom did not speak English, and they had to wait 30 minutes, 45 minutes to get inside the air-conditioned house as the bus drops them off. They're trying to just move people as quickly as they can, and things get slowed down, and it was fascinating. And, at the time, it was the second most visited house in America. Now that the White House doesn't do tours, I think it might be the most visited house in America.
That's correct.
And people from all over the world. And I always find it fascinating that Elvis never toured outside the United States, with the exception of 3 stops in 1957. And yet in every tour group, there's Germans, there's Japanese people, there's French people, there's Australians. And
Amazing.
it's crazy. In fact, my sister met her Australian husband because of Elvis.
No
So his
way.
mom was a huge fan. They came to Memphis. She wanted to see Graceland, and he met my sister, and the rest is history. So
That's crazy. Did you hear any voices, any Elvis, voices?
I did not. I will say though, everyone asked, did you go upstairs? So like Graceland, if you haven't been there, the downstairs part of it, and it's funny, they call it a mansion. It's by today's standards, just a regular old house, right? A big, nice size, but big house, but nothing like you might think that the biggest star in the world would live in.
Yeah.
But the ground floor is a couple of rooms, and you go down to the basement, but the upstairs has always been off limits. And everyone asked, oh, did you get to go upstairs? And the reason it was off limits was because it was just a regular staircase. And honestly, they were worried about like all of these people up and down the staircase and it deteriorating over time. They moved everything out of the upstairs and put it in museums across the street from Graceland. But the funny thing is, my mother went upstairs because she was on a tour there, dropped her wallet. One of the things that people don't know is that for years, Elvis's Aunt Delta lived in that house while tours were going on.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. 20, 30 years. Like she died whenever they opened up the kitchen, like in the 00s, somewhere in there. So she lived there with all these tourists running through her house, and she lived in a part of the house that was off limits. But anyway, my mom dropped her wallet. They realized when they got back to the parking lot, and this was like a private tour after hours, her school went or something. And she was like, oh, I lost my wallet. So the security guard took her back up, and Miss Delta, that's what they called her, opened the door up, and she was maybe a little fuzzy in the brain by this point, but she goes, "Do you wanna go upstairs?" And my mom's like, "I sure do." And she
Oh,
just
yeah.
took off. She was like, "I'm not letting the security guard tell me, no, we can't do it."
Oh
So
my
she went
gosh.
upstairs. She's like, "There's nothing up there," but I went. So there
Oh,
we go.
Wow.
that is awesome. That's a
I
great quote.
well, I mean, I'm like embarrassed because I'm a huge, huge Elvis fan, but I'm embarrassed that I've never been to Graceland.
Oh, you gotta go.
I
I mean,
know.
it's honestly, it is for so many reasons. They just opened up an amazing like plaza area across the street. It's almost like a small Disney World. It is such a glimpse into, again, people come away first of all, bigger Elvis fans, but also just amazed that this kid, like, and you can just tell he was a kid who got famous, bought this house, and like, oh, I like the Charger, so I'm gonna put blue and green fabric on the walls over here, and like,
Yeah.
oh, I want a giant pool table, and I make a whole room for it. Like he was just a big kid, and
Right.
Yeah.
it was neat to hear the stories with his cronies coming through year after year and telling those stories.
Yeah. Well, we go every year to an Elvis impersonator, and it's really good. They do three different Elvises, the 50s and 60s and
Oh,
70s.
perfect.
It's incredible. And as the years went along, like they had DJ, the drummer,
Yeah, DJ Fontana. Yep.
Montana, thank you. And like he was there, but he was getting up there in age,
Yeah.
But it was so cool to go to those things. Like I have $2 in college right now, and they're completely brainwashed on they know every Elvis song.
Good.
They
Listen,
do.
I bet they're the coolest kids in college. Yeah, that's one of those things. Like I wasn't an Elvis fan before I started working there, but I became one very quickly. And the strange thing about it is the house that Elvis lived in before he moved to Graceland is on the street that I grew up in and my dad still lives on.
No
So,
way.
Really?
yeah, down the street. As when I was in high school and I would come back from, during Elvis week. So Elvis week is in August. It's the anniversary of his death. And
Yep.
that's the big,
Crazy.
everyone comes there during August, which of course it's like the face of the sun in Memphis. It's so
Sure.
Yeah.
and, but I would get out of my car in my Graceland tour guide outfit, and these tour buses would come down going, "Oh, I guess we're gonna have a tour." And I'm like, "No, no." And at one point we had a basset hound. So now we've got the hound dog. We've got
Ah,
me in a tour guide outfit. And people are like, "I'm very confused by this. I should have started charging. I should have thought that one
Oh,
through."
that's funny. That is great. So you talked about Memphis, obviously. And how long were you in Memphis before you came to Cincinnati? Like officially, when you were doing the sports, how long was it before that you decided, or why did you decide to make the move to Cincinnati?
So I would say a little more than 2 years. And the reason I got here is also strange. Okay, so this was back when, again, aging me, the Houston Oilers were coming to Tennessee. And they were, where are they going to go? So Memphis and Nashville were in the mix to get the what are now the
Right.
Titans. And as a weird compromise, they decided, you know what, we're gonna have Nashville will have the Titans, or at the time the Oilers. They were the Tennessee Oilers
Right.
for like the first year. But they're going to practice in Nashville, but they're going to actually play in Memphis at the Liberty Bowl because Nashville didn't have a stadium
Right.
large
Right.
enough.
okay.
So these multi-million dollar athletes were getting on a bus and driving from Nashville to Memphis for game days, and nobody was happy. The families weren't happy. Memphis wasn't happy because they got bypassed.
Right.
Yeah.
Nashville wasn't happy because they weren't getting the games. Like nothing worked out about it.
Right.
But what it did was bring the folks from Channel 9 to Memphis when the Bengals played the Oilers at the time. And this is like Corey Dillon era. I remember he had a
Yep.
really big game.
Yep.
And so Denny Janson and John Popovich from Channel 9, Denny was there at the game, and he started talking to my boss from my station in Memphis. And he said to my boss, "Hey, we're looking for a weekend sports person. Our weekend sports anchor just left. We'd really like to have a woman," because there was a D-Line was before me. She went to
Yeah.
Philadelphia. And my boss is like, "Well, I got one for you." And so he calls me. He's like, "Get your resume tape together. We're gonna send it." I'm like, "I have a job. What are you talking about? Like, I don't need another job."
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, you do." He's like, you need to keep moving." And I'm like, "Okay." And so I messed everything up. Back in the day, you had to hit play and record to
Yeah.
record a tape, and I hit record and I recorded over my resume tape. It was all just a mess, right? And I'm like, "This is God telling me I'm not going anywhere." And he kept on me. He's like, "Just send him a tape." And within, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks, I was up here. I'd taken the job, and I started at the beginning of 1998.
Wow.
Crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just amazing that I don't know how if even if today, like, maybe there are some, maybe I'm just too, weird about it, but saying a boss to tell you to go ahead and go for another job, I mean,
Yeah, and his name's Greg Gaston. He was awesome. He also did the same thing to Pam Ward and Bonnie Bernstein. Had worked with both of them in a previous
wow,
market. So he was
Wow.
like, this is I'm not like I was by no means the first,
right,
wave of women doing sports by any means, but maybe the second or third in local news. And so it was still a little weird. And luckily, WCPO was wanting to keep that going, and wanted to replace a woman with a woman. And so I'm very grateful for it, for certain. And the interesting thing is now I'm in public relations now, and my boss now is Betsy Ross of
No.
ESPN,
yes,
Channel
Yeah.
9 and Channel
Sure.
5, and so
yeah.
we share a lot of war stories. She's got a lot better ones than I do. But yeah, so it's nice working with women in sports again.
Yep, absolutely.
So you mentioned it. You came here and working with Popo and Danny Janson. I mean,
Yeah,
because Danny and I grew up with those guys. I mean, watching them. I mean,
yeah,
they're like legends in our
they
eyes. I mean,
are legends. I'll tell you, I learned so much from each of them. Denny
yeah,
Jansen can walk into a room and know every single person in it, know what college their kids go to, the soccer team their grandkids play on, you name it, he knows it. And it's in it, he walks in and people just come to him. They love him. He has
yeah,
just that charm, and he just absolutely magnetic. John Popovich, incredible storyteller, the best storyteller I have ever been around.
Agreed.
yeah,
And just an amazing person to work with, both of them. Like that group, I was certainly third in the list. Like, and that's one of the reasons I moved out of sports and into news. Is like, where am I going to go with these two guys? Like,
Yeah,
I'm certainly like,
yeah,
they're going to retire because they
yeah.
are excellent at what they do and love it. I, I'm not going to be able to move up anywhere, and I don't want to go anywhere else. And so that's one of the reasons I switched over to news. But yeah, the things that I learned from them, and the just watching how they conducted business, just remarkable.
Well, we're gonna date ourselves here. I remember watching Denny Jansen with Nick Clooney and Ira
Mm.
Joe Fisher on Channel 12. That's
the
how much.
mustache had a big
Yeah, the
mustache.
Oh,
mustache.
yeah. I've seen those pictures. That was before my time here, certainly, but, yeah, he talked about those days.
Yeah, it was good. But so talk about so you did the sports for a while, did an awesome job in the sports, and then you moved over to the news. Talk a little bit about, the decision to move over to the news. And like I'm just sitting here thinking about, I know that you guys start news early in the morning. That's like a 1:30 or before. I
Yeah,
don't even know what time you get up. Talk about
What?
that decision
yeah,
because I mean
yeah.
that's a pretty big
You
change.
know, the thing with television news, local television news, is there is no 9 to 5. There is no good shift. So it's mornings, or it's nights, or it's weekends. And depending where you are on on the list, maybe holidays and all of that. And so I'd gotten married, and we had decided, we want to have kids, and essentially we were working opposite shifts. And so this morning news opportunity came up. They were kind of revamping the morning show, and adding to it and making it a little more like
Right,
conversational, things like that. And believe it or not, morning news and sports have a lot in common. And I go back to that whole ad living part of it, like being able to just think on your feet. And, if the wrong highlight is shown, you got to figure out who it is. And you're like, okay, who's number 23? Let me figure that out. Okay, I'll remember now.
Yeah,
So same thing with morning news. You just, I mean, with the show that's 2.5 hours, something's going to go wrong. Like, there's
right,
absolutely no way for it to go perfectly right. So the ability to think on your feet was a very transferable skill from sports to news. Now, what was not transferable, as you pointed out, is the wake up call. Like,
right.
I am a morning person, but not that kind of morning person. The show started and originally started at 5, then it moved back to 4:30. And I'm a person who wants to read my scripts and make sure everything looks right and is spelled right and all that. So I would get up at 1:40 was my earliest wake up. I mean, I
oh,
had to have those 10 more minutes. Like, 1:30 sounded crazy.
Yeah.
So I woke up at 1:40. I would get to work at 3, and then would work till about, I was part-time for a while when I had kids, but I mean, it was still till 9:30. I'm like, I didn't really fully grasp what part-time was. I was
Right.
still working 5 days a week, 6 hours a day. I'm like, that's not
Yeah, it's not
really
part-time.
part-time. But then a normal day would take me till 11. And so then you have to find time to sleep and, with little kids, it's always
how
hard.
did
And
you sleep? I mean,
I
Yeah.
would split, like a lot of people would like right now, I know a lot of the morning people, I'm going to go to bed at 8 o'clock every night. This is how it's going to work. I can't live like that. So I would sleep in the afternoon for a couple of hours and then go to sleep at night around 10. So I got by for 15 years on very little sleep. I would not recommend it. And it is amazing how quickly your
Wow.
body reverts back once you're on a normal shift.
I just can't even imagine like how like I mean, there's just normal working the normal shift, and sometimes I wake up and I'm like, man, I'm exhausted, I'm tired. I can't
Mhm.
even imagine. Then you got to go on air. It's like
Yeah,
I don't
it's
have
a
to worry about
switch.
looking good at work. I just go to
Yeah,
work.
you definitely can flip a switch. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but the ability to like put things in a box, like I'm tired, I'm sick, I'm mad, I'm whatever. Nope,
Right.
stuff it down in that box, and I'm gonna do this newscast. And so that it gets you through. And adrenaline helps too when you're
Yeah.
when you're on
I'm
air
sure.
like that.
I'm sure.
Wow. So I want to go back real quick. When you were with Popo and Denny Janson, who were the actual news and weather that you worked with?
So Carol Williams and Clyde Gray,
Oh yeah.
and initially Pete Delkus and then Steve Raleigh.
Okay.
Yeah, I still
Delkus.
Carol and a group of us still get together 3 or 4 times a year. And I see a lot of those folks still. But yeah, so the morning people with me though were Larry Hanley initially. And it was Larry Hanley and me, and then I had a cast of characters as a co-anchor. But yeah, when I worked sports on the weekdays, it was Carol and Clyde and Pete Delkus and Steve Raleigh.
Good cast right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all stars.
And I mean, you could probably attest with it. They seemed just from watching it like they were more down to earth, good people.
All those Ted Baxter, Mary Tyler Moore, like
Ted Ba-
cliches, I never ran into it.
Oh,
I'll tell you,
good.
the people that I worked with and honestly, I'm in newsrooms a lot now with what I do now. I bring clients in for interviews and stuff like that. Those sorts of like competitions and like it's not there, and the egos are not there. We are. I'm not saying they're not there in every market, but in this market, we have what you see is what you get. The people
That's
who you
good.
look at and watch on TV and you're like, wow, they seem really nice. They are. They're really nice. There's not a lot of egos. And it's really nice to, what I always say is you're always at the same, like, especially the reporters, you're always at the same events. Like if there's a fire, you're all going to be there. So
Right.
there's no point in not getting along with each other because you're all getting the same
Right.
2 little nuggets of information. So you might as well be nice to each other because
Right.
I'll look out for you and you'll look out for me. Same with sports and those sorts of things. You're always on the same sidelines. You're always at the same
Mhm.
press conferences.
Yep.
So it pays to keep up those relationships.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
Go ahead, Steve.
no, I was gonna say, so no, I can't think of the character's name, the Will Ferrell
Mm.
newscaster. What's
Oh
his
wow.
Ron Burgundy.
Ron Burgundy?
Yes.
There have been a couple of those. There were a couple of those. I remember one time a unnamed news anchor turned to me. It was Xavier had done something, and he knew better. He turned to me and he's like, "So Xavier," and I was like, "Oh, oh, you said Xavier. What are you doing?" Like he's been in
Yeah.
the city for 10 years. And I'm like, and my face was like, "What are you saying? You can't call
Yeah.
him Xavier. What is
Yeah.
that?"
Yeah.
Can't do that.
So yeah,
No,
there's not a lot of egos though. Maybe some questionable turns of phrase, but not a lot of egos.
So have you ever? My wife got me hooked on the morning show.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you watched it? Have you seen
Oh
it?
yeah, I watch every bit of it.
Does
Does
that?
any of that
I mean,
relate?
What's that?
Does any of that relate to you?
It does. Like, I mean, I can't talk to the sexual escapades
No.
and the murders and all of that. I think we were free of that. But a couple of things really I think stood out. First of all, the most important person in a newsroom is the producer. The
yeah.
people on the air, that's all well and good. Those are the people you see at home. But the people who are the most important are the producers. And that's Maya in Morning Show. If you ever
Yes. Yeah.
if you watch it, she's the one who makes all the decisions. She's the one like in a local newsroom, they decide what stories are going to lead, how long the stories are going to be, how it's written many times. And so when you start talking about who has the most like control over news and over a message, it's the producer. One of the least paid people in the entire newsroom and one of the toughest jobs. And so I think that really shows through in the morning show, certainly.
Well, I mean,
Wow.
I think that was more the cutthroat that you were talking, we were kind of talking about earlier back then. That I'm sure that back in the day was probably like that. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I'm sure. Yeah, listen, I've heard stories about, anchors who had come before the ones I worked with and some of the things that they did and said, but I never got to see any of that stuff. And I will say this, I also have never seen an anchor with a full-on dressing room like on the morning show, although
Yeah,
that's national, so we'll see.
that's true.
But
Good
yes.
point. Good point. So you did talk about earlier about having the earpiece on, it's a
Mhm.
teleprompter. Like, was there? I've always wondered about that because I've seen people on air and stuff like that. Has there been any moment like when the teleprompter, the earpiece? I can't
Oh
even
yeah.
imagine someone chomping in your ear the whole time as you're trying to talk. Talk a little bit about any kind of experience
Yeah.
you have with that with
So
malfunction.
that's another producer element. So the producer is the person who's in the booth also telling you that story's dead, skip over that story, move on. Now
Oh,
that everything is computerized, it actually helps a great deal because you can, like we do right now, you can delete an email or delete a story, and in a second, it's no longer in the teleprompter. That was not the case before.
Right.
It used to be the old teleprompters were literally
Mhm.
pieces of paper taped together, like rolled through a camera. So if you killed story number 3, you
You
got to
gotta
pull it
rip it.
through really quickly, somebody on the other side of the room.
oh,
Um,
geez.
but yeah, so that part's a little bit crazy. That was a little before my time. But yeah, so if there were stories that were killed, they would tell you in your ear, you just had to keep moving. But there's plenty of times what I always say is the teleprompter is a computer. Think about how frequently our computers crash or like
Right.
unexpectedly quit. That would happen, especially when you're dealing with a 2.5 hour show. And so it's just running and running and running. And
Right.
so, yeah, the prompter would go dead. That's why you always have to have your hard copies or your computer ready to move on and read it off your computer. It's funny because now, like, I can't go anywhere with my readers. I'm like, I don't know how I do it now because I'd be like doing one of these. Like, I
Uh-huh.
can see
Same
far
way.
here, but I can't see close. And it would be a mess. But yeah, but there's lots of computer errors. And so that's one of the reasons I liked reading stories ahead of time is like, so I may not know all of it, but I know kind of
Know
the gist
something.
of
Yeah.
it and I can talk my way through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who was your co-host on the morning show?
So I ran through a bunch, including no one for a while. So David Rose was my first
Yeah.
one,
I
and then
remember him.
I had a rotating cast of characters until Chris Riva toward the end of my tenure on the morning show, and he is incredible.
Yeah.
Still a great friend, and so yeah, it's funny when I was by myself, and I think I think it was a cost cutting measure. I'm not even sure, but when I was by myself, I found myself ad libbing with myself. Like I got
Yeah.
like to the point where I'm like, I
Had
gotta
to.
talk to somebody like this. And so I'm talking and I'm laughing at myself. I'm like, this is probably really weird. So I think they were like, okay, we gotta get her a co-anchor. Let's get somebody else in there.
Funny.
So when you had those co-anchors, I mean, I'm sure you guys prepared and you're doing interviews, stuff like that. Was there any blunders or as far as like co-hosts like taking questions that you should have asked or vice
A
versa?
lot of we didn't do a whole lot of like live interviews like that. What would happen sometimes is you have to anticipate what the other person's doing. And what I always say is like with a co-anchor, and you guys know this doing games, I spent more time with my co-anchor than I did with my own husband. How
Right.
often are we, any of us, seated next to our spouse for 2.5 hours and neither one of you gets up? Like it never
Right.
happens,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And so commercial breaks were either, hilarious or goofy or somebody running to the bathroom,
Right.
something like that. But yeah, the anticipate like that's why like the relationship has to be a good one. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying I got along with all my coworkers either. And I'm not
Right.
saying that's all their fault. But
Yeah.
if you've got to be able to play off each other. And that was the one
Yeah.
thing that once you get that, it makes everything easier. You can just really anticipate what the other person's doing, especially in a breaking news situation. Because when there's breaking news, there's no script. It's just like,
Right.
okay, you guys talk, and then you're going to toss to this person, and then you're going to talk some more, and then you're going to talk to
Yeah.
this person. And so you would just have to like anticipate. And then when I would stop talking, he would start talking. And so it just became like you have to read the other person really well.
Catherine,
Flow.
you know why he's saying that is
Why is
because
that? Are you are
he does
is it
he
your
does it
fault?
he does
He's
it to
taken
me all
2
the
questions
time.
already tonight from you.
Every so I do these questions, I write the script, right, and just kinda, yeah, maybe this will
Yeah.
do, tell me if you got anything going on. Every single podcast that we've done, he will steal one of my questions and he'll give me like the look. He'll just nod his head or do something, and he'll see
That
me
means that you
smiling.
wrote a good question though. So I take
Oh,
it as
thank
a
you.
compliment.
He always and then when we do it in the studio, before we get on, he'll make a do something because he knows I'm gonna laugh.
Yeah.
And try to
Yeah.
get so he's real good at doing that. That's why he asked that question, because
Well,
he's
there
good at
you
stealing
go.
questions.
Now you know.
Now you know.
So we had the pleasure of working together for just a short period of time on our podcasts and
Yep.
our USBN platforms. And so I know that you're involved with a lot of, being on a camera coach, media trainer now, like you said, on game day. Talk a little bit about all the stuff that you have done since you left the morning show.
Yeah, so I worked for the Inquirer for 3 years. That was awesome. Great people over there. And the cool thing about it is they wanted to take what they were doing, the great journalism that they were doing there, and put it on a different platform. So they had me doing Facebook Lives. And so I would just explain, like, hey, did you see this story? Sherry Coolidge wrote it, and she did this deep dive into blank, blank, and blank. And what it did was take a story that maybe somebody would have clicked on or maybe wouldn't even know about, and put it on a platform, Facebook, where they were. So the whole idea is taking the stories and putting it where the people were. And
Mhm.
at that point it was Facebook. And then we'd throw the links in the comments, and it was great. And I loved it. And I was there for a long time, for 3 years, and until game day came calling. And game day had just celebrated its 20th year. It's a sports and media marketing, public relations, media relations firm. Started, as I said, by Betsy Ross from ESPN, and Jackie Rose, a longtime PR and marketing professional here in town. And they have amassed just the best clients in town. And it's every day's just an amazing experience. I love it. I love getting up in the morning. I love working. And the interesting thing is, going all the way back to Graceland, this is a job, and this is what I always tell people, there's a through line with what you do, you know what I mean? So, like, you're gonna take what you did here, and then what you did here, and what you did here. There's something that connects all of that,
Mhm.
and for me, this job connects it all. So, I'm back in my sports mind. We cover, we do public relations for the LPGA tournament, and, we help, with the tennis tournament a bit. And then, I get to do a little bit for the Reds. Last
Yeah.
year, got to work with Valley Sports, was just incredible. I loved it so much. And also, in addition to that, what my day-to-day job is media relations. So I'm taking our clients' stories and getting them in print, on digital, and on television. So I know exactly, how to do that, right? I know where the pain points are, who needs a story, who needs an easy story, who needs a really hard-hitting story, and I can position those stories to the right person.
Awesome.
And so that's been incredible. And then in addition to that, I do, as you mentioned, Dan, I do camera consulting.
Yeah.
So look, we're all on Zoom. This is also important. Everybody from interns to CEOs are being judged on the way they look in these little
Right.
boxes. And so I help people look and feel better on camera. And I also do media training. In fact, I've got two coming up tomorrow and the next day, training
Yeah.
folks with tire discounters all over the region, like the southern part of the United States, just teaching them how to prepare for media interviews. So I get to use all the stuff that I've done before and position it and kind of share it in a different way. So it's been a really great experience so
Yeah,
far.
you really helped us out a lot because we did the
Mhm.
suggestion that you brought up. It's trying to put that podcast out at the same time all the
Yeah.
time. We did that, and it started getting
Good, good,
more
good.
views. So we really appreciate your help with us. It's really helped us out a lot. So we appreciate it.
Oh, I'm happy to do it.
So you said you're working with Valley Sports for the
So
Reds?
last year, yeah, I did last year. So this year's a little different. So I've done their opening day parade for several years. In fact, before the pandemic, so probably since 2018. This year, they're not doing the opening day parade, though. Valley Sports is not. They're doing the
Oh,
game, but not the parade. And then last year, I was able to fill in for some pre and post game Reds games during the year. And again, I was the third in line and happy to be there. So I don't have any scheduled for this year, but if they need me, I am happy to be
That's
there.
awesome.
It was fantastic. It was really an interesting and a completely different thing than what I was used to doing in a newscast. This was almost completely ad-libbed, and it completely contingent upon what's happening that night.
right
So,
then, yeah.
but it was a great learning experience and a lot of fun. Loved
Was that
working with them as
was
well.
that in studio and out of studio?
Yeah. So luckily, and I felt very guilty for this when they were in the midst of that 12-game winning streak. I was there. I was game 12. Like, I was like, how did I mean, that the condo, as they call it, was just full of people
Yeah.
screaming and yelling. We couldn't hear a thing. And I'm like, this is not fair that this is my first game that I'm doing. And it's this,
Yeah.
but yeah, so in studio and out on the plaza there.
That's pretty awesome. So, one thing I want to get into too, and wanted to talk about is my sister-in-law has had breast cancer, and I know you're a two-time survivor of breast cancer. It's amazing being a one-time survivor, but you've been a two-time. So talk a little bit about that. The whole, I know like when my sister-in-law had it, and just the initial shock, and then
Mhm.
helping my brother, and trying to help him through that and all that. So talk a little bit about when you found out, and just kind of the whole fight through that.
I the first time had it in 2012. At the time, I was, 38 years old. I had no family history of breast cancer. I had no reason to think I was going to get breast cancer. And I remember I went in for a mammogram, and I even had to talk my gynecologist into recommending me for a mammogram because I wasn't old enough and I didn't have any family history. And he's like, "You don't really need this." And I'm like, "Who knows? Just let me do it." Right. And he's like, "Fine." And then that was a baseline mammogram, that one was fine, and over the course of time, I found a couple of things that were benign. My mom had, cysts and those sorts of things, women have them all the time, no big deal. But then in 2012, found out that this one was cancerous. And I tell this because I think it's extremely important. Mammograms are awesome, but the mammogram did not catch this. It was the size of a pencil eraser. So think about this, like this big,
Wow.
and the mammogram did not catch it because a 2D mammogram can only do so much. I can get into how this is the best thing we've got. I have no idea. So number one, ask for the 3D mammogram, even if your insurance doesn't cover it. But number two, it's on us to do self exams and to figure out our own bodies. And so we found out that that was cancer. And it was crazy because we go into the room and there's tissues, and you're like, okay, if there's tissues, this cannot be good. This is not going
Right.
to go
No.
well.
Right.
And then they, the cancer that I had initially was very rare, but also very curable. So I was very lucky there. So I had radiation and surgery, but that was about it. And then 9 years later, thinking I'm almost home free, I have another. I had an every 6 months I had an ultrasound or a 3D mammogram and then an MRI. So every 6 months I was having something. And this one time it came up, they're like, "Oh, something's weird. This doesn't look right." And I was like, "Well, I mean, I just had it 6 months ago, so I should be good, right?"
Right.
But I also like to share this note. Breast cancer takes 7 years to kind of grow in your body before you can really find that it's there. So we found it, and it was a completely different kind of cancer, but a second kind of cancer. So yay, So I ended up having a double mastectomy and reconstruction after that. And, so I never had to go through chemotherapy, which I'm eternally grateful for. And I know a lot of women have it a lot worse. But it just goes to show you that we are never out of the woods. And so as I always like to say, if you have breasts or love someone who does, please have them go in for their mammograms. Time to schedule that mammogram.
Yeah. Was
Yeah.
that? I mean, like when I talked to my sister-in-law too. I mean, that was a decision that she made, the same thing, had a double
Mhm.
mastectomy, and I asked her the same. I'm sure that had have been a very hard, question. Like she said, not only myself, but my husband, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of things to think about. So was that did it make it easier because you had it before, or you know what I mean? Like,
For me, it was like, yeah, because the first time I was like, let's just cut them off. Like, let's go.
yeah.
I don't need these things anymore. And my doctor was like, no, 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 no. His wife had breast cancer. So imagine that, a breast cancer surgeon whose wife
Oh,
had breast
Right.
geez.
cancer. I
Yeah.
know. And he's like, my wife had that surgery and regretted it because we thought maybe other surgeries would have been better and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay. But then the second time I'm like, I'm done with this, because I'll tell you what it is. It's not like, first of all, it is a major surgery. It is 2 surgeries, and that's something that people don't understand. I'm I had that surgery 2 years ago, and I'm still like, I don't have my full range of motion. Like,
Oh,
it
Right.
is extensive. It is an extensive surgery. But it's also anyone who has had biopsies and having the guided biopsies, which you are in a like you're it's almost like there was one time that I was on a table and the doctor is like on one of those mechanic things like they go under the car with. Like that's what and she's like trying to get a needle to get a
Oh,
biopsy. And I'm like,
Cool.
this
oh,
it like, and then the nerves waiting for that test result to come back. I'm
right.
like, I am done with this. I'm done with the anxiety. I just let's and to be fair, mastectomy isn't a be all end all. Like I still have to go in for just to get things checked and all of that. But yeah, it is it is not like I think that we so frequently say, and unfortunately, so many women have breast cancer or have had breast cancer and have had mastectomies that we're like, oh, you just have a mastectomy, and and not to get too far into it, but when people are like, "Oh, you'll get brand new boobs," I'm like, I was good with my old ones. Like, I'm good. Like, let's not make this into a vanity thing. You know,
Uh,
it's certainly something that obviously I'm okay talking about, and I feel like
Yeah.
that's half the battle is making sure that people are okay talking about it, getting those tests done, and knowing their options.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing. Steve and I we do another podcast called Positive Energy Podcast, and it's about, people like yourself and my sister-in-law. And we had a friend that had cancer to talk about
Mm.
the emotions and what they went through and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
I think it is very important for everybody to talk about it, because
Yeah,
it's,
and honestly, like the roller coaster, and every once in a while I'll get a DM or a text or email from somebody, a friend or a friend of a friend, who's like, "Oh, I, just had my biopsy this week. They tell me it's not gonna be back for 2 weeks." And I'm like, "That's the worst. If there's one thing in this medical world that I feel like that I wish we could fix, it's that the waiting. I have
mhm.
a friend who just had, a biopsy this week, and he's gonna have to wait till next week to find out.
Oh,
It's like
yeah,
that's the longest
right.
week ever, and it's
yeah.
so hard. It's so hard. And the other thing is, and they mean it in the nicest way. Like even when I got diagnosed the first time, I remember the doctor saying, "Oh, this is the good kind of cancer." He meant that really. What he meant was it's very curable. But
Right.
I'm hearing good cancer. Like,
Cancer,
come on
right.
now, sir. Like, let's let's not call this good.
Right,
But they're so used to it, and they're so like a week is so normal,
right.
in that medical world, and they're so backed up. But I understand, but man, it is nerve wracking
Oh,
when
yeah.
you're
Yeah. It's crazy.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, let's talk about your family because I want to
okay.
know about your kids and I'm guessing from the sounds of it, you met your husband when you moved here. Is that
I
right?
did. Yes.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah,
tell us about
Tanya
your husband and your
O'Rourke, my
kids.
former coworker, she introduced us. She was his
Tanya
neighbor.
Really?
Rourke.
So who knew?
It's
Who
crazy.
knew? So tell us about your kids.
Yeah, so they are, I have a daughter who's a sophomore at Xavier,
Okay.
and my younger daughter who it just announced she's going to go to Ohio University next
All
year.
right.
Okay.
So we're keeping them in the state, keeping them
Yeah.
close. But yeah, so they're both doing well and excited, and so we're about to be empty nesters. We'll have to see how that goes, but we're excited for them, and it's a really exciting time to see. I tell my friends with little kids all the time. I'm like, I know you hate hearing this, but it's gonna go so fast, and everybody
Right.
Yeah.
told me that too, and I'm like, whatever."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's like, I feel like I was just like they were just graduating from middle school, and, like, here
Oh,
we are talking about high school, so
yeah.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
loved your things that you had with your girls. I think I remember seeing on Facebook the coffee or whatever.
Oh, Frozen
Like
Fridays,
the,
yeah, that was
yeah,
my excuse just to go to a different ice cream place every week, and I called
yeah,
it work, so
yeah.
they
That was
keep
pretty
asking me, "Are
neat.
we still doing that?" I'm like, "I think we hit them all." Like, we did it for 3 years, like, that's a lot of ice cream places over the summer.
All right, so this is the kind of the one I kind of was going to tell you about. That so we always kind of try to end our podcast with some favorite memories. So
Okay.
what? Give me some of your favorite memories that you covered either in sports or news.
So,
There's
it's
got to be some
funny,
good ones.
this is perfect timing because the, opening day parade, grand marshals or whatever, Dimitri Young and Pokey Reese, that was my favorite Reds team. I loved that team. I got to cover them in spring training a couple of years. So like 98, 99, 2000, I
Yeah,
guess 99, 2000, or maybe in 98 as well. They were just amazing. Pete Harnish, that whole
yeah,
that starting pitching line of Scott Sullivan and Gabe White, the bullpen. They were hilarious. Danny Graves. I remember one time so we would have to do like a 30-minute like opening day special. So it would be some like nuts and bolts, but you had to have something that was interesting. So a bunch of them would go play golf. So we went and played golf with them. Or I mean, we drove in a golf cart
right,
behind them.
right.
I have never heard the trash talk in my life, as I heard on and it was
Really?
like, it was Danny Graves and Pete Harnish mainly. And there was an alligator on the course and they're poking it with their putter. Like it was
Oh
just
god.
hilarious. I mean, that was, they were, I love spring training for a million reasons, but especially with a young team, they don't know what they don't know. So
Right.
like they're all excited
Yeah.
and like, I mean, and that was a decent team too. That was a fun team to be around. And that was really one of my favorite things to cover.
Did you have any, what were you I'm trying to think about 9/11. Were you anything with that on the news or sports? Or were you
Well,
still in?
strangely, so 9/11 again, that was weird because I was off Mondays and Tuesdays. That was a Tuesday. I'd
Mm,
woken up early that day because I had to get, like, invitations out for my sister's bachelorette party. Like, I remember this specifically, and
uh-huh.
this is a very strange memory to have. They were in the shape of underwear, and I am putting these in the as as I'm watching the news and, like, Katie Couric is telling me this horrible news. So I
Yeah,
would never have been up at that hour, never have been up because I
Yeah,
work nights, and so
yeah,
for some reason, I was up that day, and immediately I knew I needed to go into work. Not that I thought I could do
right,
anything, but none of us knew what was happening, right? We didn't know if it was terrorism all over the country. We
right.
didn't know if there were more planes. None of us knew anything. So I went to work and I remember just like editing video and just like doing whatever I could. And it was that was a weird day at work. Because things were starting to like become a little more clear by like
Right,
midday, but none of us knew it. I mean, none of us had lived through anything like that. And
right.
right.
hopefully we'll never again. But yeah, it was a strange day where everybody came together to help to get the information out because that
Right.
was, even though the internet was there, people were turning on the TV for breaking news. They were turning on the TV and they wanted to know, and they wanted to know immediately. And so that was our job.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna end it real quick too to let you know that my wife is loved watching you, and she refused to watch that channel anymore
Good, me too.
because she
Wife
swore up and down that she said I will never, and she hasn't, and she
Well, I have some great friends who are still there, and but I tell your wife I appreciate it very much.
no, we really appreciate it. I know you're super busy with everything you got going on, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. I know it really helps us out a lot too. And well,
Yep.
I tell you what, Catherine, we're super. Steve and I are kind of a little nervous. We've got Pat Williams coming on, the former Orlando Magic,
Oh my goodness.
and you talk about. I told Steve, I said, I'm getting geeked up because this guy is he's so intelligent. He's done so much stuff, and I'm
That's
like, I
awesome.
just don't want to look like an idiot when I'm doing this.
You will not look like an idiot. Listen, everybody likes to talk about themselves. Just keep asking him about himself, and you'll be like, "Oh,
That's
tell
it.
me more about
Yeah.
that."
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. We really appreciate you joining us. We really do.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
guys so much. I appreciate you.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up here for Dingo and the Coach. So for Steve Ellis and Dingo Dan Albers, who've been watching Dingo and the Coach, we'll guys catch you guys next week.